Welcome to the Tug of Heart podcast on Strong Island Radio. This is the place where we dig deep into the heart to rise in love. So let's join good friends Lori and Marianne as they discuss understanding and living from the heart.
Hello and welcome to Tug of Heart. This is Lori Cordova. I'm here with Marianne Franzese.
Hi, Lori.
How you doing, Mar?
Pretty good.
You have just been here, there, a little of everywhere.
Yes, I actually got to do a little bit of traveling with family. So
Beautiful.
that was so nice.
I'm so
Yes.
happy for you. And I'm, in a selfish way, so happy you're back. Especially today, I was telling you right before we sat down here that how grateful I was you came back just before 9/11.
Yes.
Because I don't know that I would observe it in the same way, left to my own.
Yes.
Not that I'm unfeeling about it, but just the way that I'm put together. I take things in and express them a little differently.
Yes.
But I'm very grateful to be here with you to do it.
Me too. Me too.
So today we're talking about September 11th, 20 years ago, right? In 2 more days, 20 years ago, is that
Yes,
right?
20 years later, right?
20 years later, here we are. And this remains in our hearts so profoundly.
Forever, forever.
And it leaves a lot of questions as situations that are hard to witness as humans, and harder than to witness is to take in that resolve that what we're witnessing is also who we are, not just what is outside of us,
Yes.
and that we're separate from. So 20 years ago, I was actually in New Mexico. I was in UNM on campus the day that the first plane had gone into the first tower. And of course, like everybody, I remember the feeling, but I also remember it, I think, in a different way than what your experience would be being right here in New York.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, like, kind of a brief, like, situational perspective on it from afar. 2,300 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was telling you just before we actually came into the studio that this was the last time I felt like that imminent fear of life and death.
Yes.
I haven't experienced it again. It kind of ended it. And that's a story for another time, I guess. But the fear is where this story begins for me, because this is, I heard it on the radio as I was parking, and the first response is that wash of fear or being frozen. So I feel like universally as a whole in the country, and again, this is being thousands of miles away from New York, together we felt the fear, the confusion, and kind of the chaos of vulnerability together as a nation. And then as the hours passed, it was compounded with grief and shock, rage, so many people, and profound hurt.
Yeah.
We had already started to look around just shortly after this happened, even in New Mexico, but especially here. We saw you guys do this first, Marianne, and it was amazing. And that's in that fear and that immediate, when you're left with nothing except your human nature after something like that, you do what comes natural, because there is no training for these things. And that was that people reached out to one another for comfort almost immediately from coming out of the building, arms over one another's shoulder, helping each other. And then the rest of the country, I would say, followed after what we saw here. And I feel like in a lot of ways we found ourselves reaching out. And in that reaching out and finding another body there that was reaching back out, it inevitably formed these bonds. Just hours, within hours, new bonds were forming that again, just a couple hours before these events, these bonds would not have been obvious. But in that moment, they became. And we formed a unity we didn't know was possible almost immediately. We witnessed just amongst ourselves the comfort and strength that can only be found in community. And to me, it redefined what a community is, because I would have thought, you hear me say a lot, my people. I consider that community. But it was like, and then what? What was your experience here of seeing that? Because this is just from afar again.
Well, I'd agree that it was a mark of terror,
Right.
like that kind of actually feeling terrorized and the helplessness of the terror. And, I think about what we're talking about today, 9/11 and the heart, and what you just spoke about in this building of community. It is, those twins, the Twin Towers, we saw them go up. They went up. I remember being a girl and watching them go up and be
wow.
built. And to see them come to their knees, the attack was such an act of hate, and the fall was a falling in love because of the way that the community came together in that fear. So that's what I'm thinking about today as I sit here in remembrance, is the heart was very, very present. And I think that we did fall in love with each other at that moment of deep,
like
deep
a
loss.
genuine way.
Genuinely did. And so my children were young at the time. And so the first act was to gather my children, go and pick them up right from school, bring the
gosh.
children home. And recently, NYU just made a documentary called Blue Skies about the 20th anniversary. And the day of 9/11, we had an intern from the NYU Drama Therapy coming out to work with us at Kid Esteem. And he got on the 9 o'clock train, and then there were no more trains running for the next 2 days. And so brand new at his supervisor's home, he came and he couldn't get back. And in the documentary film that NYU made, they interviewed him. And he said, being with us as a family, it was all about gathering the children and helping the children to express their fears. And I didn't even remember this. He said in the film, the kids just kept asking, like, are we going to be okay? Is the world going to be okay? And our answer, which of course is the answer you give to children, yes, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And he said in that moment, he was like, is it going to be okay? Like, are we going to be okay as a people? He said that's what he was thinking. And to me, one of the things that was so striking in watching the documentary is I haven't seen him in 20 years. He was a young man in his mid-20s, and now he's an older man. And that the passage of time, like, struck my heart of 20 years. People have grown older. People have walked with this grief, with this trauma, the impact. It has aged us. It has aged us. And it just, like, hit my heart, and we're still here. We're here. We somehow survived. We're here. And what are we going to do with that? How do we make use of that?
That's right.
So that was really like just again, for all of those that we lost and all of the families that had to ride the impact of that loss. there has been a tremendous, lifelong, eternal grieving that I think will go on. But I do think that there is this piece of the love that is tremendous in all of it.
It is. From further away looking in, when this happened, I had conversations with people outside of the country. This is prior to this. And so I kind of had an awareness, and it was becoming peaked around this time of how much the rest of the world hated us. There's not another word for it at this time. And again, so what I share here is my perspective at the time, but I do remember reading that 90% of the world hated America. And I also remember this is when forums first came up, not Facebook, but like dial-in forum, and it's such a great chance to talk to people. So to practice my rusty German, I had logged into German forums to talk. I grew up having pen pals from Egypt, and so I was like, hey, I'll just talk to them and see how my German is. And as soon as it shows my country and everything, I remember hearing these obscenities and F Americans, we would put the bomb on you. Very close to this time, but before. So it was kind of the held feeling. And I would hear it a lot from outside, and the critics of America would be like, basically like, Americans are so show-offy.
Well, right. The capitalism.
Yeah,
that sense of greed.
This was revolting to other people, to other ethnicities and nationalities, other nations, and their feeling was that we were so like in everybody's face with our power, and the Twin Towers were such a symbol of this. Just the ultimate symbol was a real in-your-face structure. Concrete structures have this way of literally concretizing more than just their form and shape. And it was where they were, what they symbolized, what we were doing in them. And so many outside waited in the aftermath, and they thought they would see Americans like kind of humbled. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, and I'm not saying we're right or wrong, but I'm going to have to stand with where I exist on this, but they thought we would have come across as humbled or have learned a lesson. But instead, it kind of silenced a lot of people that hated us, in that we rose. We didn't, but in a different spirit. So we didn't rise in like just stubbornness and defiance. That also, but a different underlying spirit to it. We didn't cower. They thought we'd be like, oh, we've gone too far, and really like get it. We didn't respond with self-abasement about Americans. And personally, I feel that's appropriate for the time when people are still wounded and cannot be found, not the time. But instead, there was like this announcement and acknowledgement from America that there is evil in the world. And this part I would question, and it was a little bit of, but it's separate from us kind of thing. So there was this line. But anyway, so we rebuilt in the same spot the towers were. They built another structure. And the sentiment was, we'll make it bigger, stronger, and somehow like more. We will even concretize this idea of who we are, stronger together, all the more, but not in your face this time. And as it turned out, it wasn't as how high we can build to the gods, nothing like that. It was a growth born of clinging to one another in chaos and confusion and fear. And so there's humility in it, but I don't think in the middle of shock would be the time that settles in. And I don't know, as a community, how long residual shock rests, but I feel like today we're left with the same answers as some of the initial shock, which can be numbing, wears off. And we ask ourselves, this happened here, we begin to build here, but we're still left with those questions like, the questions about mankind, the world, the nature of mankind, the nature of nature, the nature of God for many, why, the how, that can either separate us from God, and it did for many, where we put him on the side of tragedy. This happened. How could he do it? Was he? For some people, he's teaching us a lesson. For some people, it's he allows this because not to allow it is different, but it was as if he had done it so that something could be gained. And when I was telling you earlier, when I think about tragedy, like and suffering more than tragedy, just suffering, I'm very drawn to what Holocaust survivors have said, because they've done the work. We were talking about who's put the time in and the effort. And among them, I remember before 9/11, this is again in my teens when I actually read books, do you remember Harold Kushner? When bad things happen to good people.
Right,
okay?
right.
I can't say I wholeheartedly agree with all of the philosophy behind it, but what I do like that I remember of it is this idea that why is it that we would separate God as if he did this on one side to us, and why would we do this as if people are on one side and did it to us? That second part might be my addition. But what if we look at things instead as when we're saddened and hurt by this, God may just be alongside us as well. Mm-hmm. And what would that change about how we approach tragedies? And he knows more than us without getting, but it's like, it comes down to, when we're left with the questions, how do we shift? It's perfectly normal to be angry. I was angry that I lost my son, so angry. But to what end? Mm-hmm. And what is the end? And what purpose remains when the most valuable thing's been lost? I'll let you speak, but it's a fair question, and it's a good question, I think.
Right.
Because here we are. Beyond that, with COVID, in a very personal way, the school, our Darlene Sethi, your marriage, so many things compounded on top of that 9/11. Where do we begin?
Well, and I think it goes back to we are still here.
Right.
Right? So the sense of, if I am going to continue on, then I have to, in some way, make peace with this in my heart, right? And even in the rebuilding is a memorial for the 3,000 people who were lost, right? Every name is there to say, we remember you. Somehow your life isn't going to be lost in vain. And the problem that I always had with what happened was that the terrorists truly, truly believed that they would be rewarded by their God for this act. And so this sense of terror being part of God's world or intention for us just isn't so. It's just no. It's no.
Right.
It's no in all ways. And so what you're talking about is this connection to faith, to spirit, to God, in somehow rising in a way that we can do better, be better. And one of the things that I told the children, right, in return to the children, at Spark, when we were talking about 9/11, was that in order for this kind of violence to stop, then we have to start with the children in teaching them a way to express their anger and teaching them a way to truly listen and understand someone else's anger so that resolution can happen differently. So anger doesn't have to be expressed through violence, murder. And that's where I feel like we get closest to God and the Creator, and the mission of the future is to provide our children with an alternative to this kind of expression.
Right. And it's another moment that gives us opportunity to do that, repeated so many times throughout history. The Holocaust, 4 million. This one was 3,000. We kind of attended to it because it's on our turf. But in looking at that, like, there's this idea of this paradox between, like, how could I, like between fate, if you want to call it that, and responsibility. And for me, it feels like when we see these things happen, and so much trauma, so much pain, and I feel like the only tiny sliver left that could add to the trauma and the level of devastation we saw then. For many people, now I'm not saying this is right, but the mistake I feel like people make is to say that the only thing that could possibly make this worse is this idea that we belong to that same vehicle of our self-destruction.
I don't know what you mean.
Well,
by that.
so if we were saying they did it, this group did it, this sect did it, this
Yeah.
the certain beliefs, they did it, because we tend to do that because the bigger picture is that man is capable of this.
For sure.
And we run the risk of staying in these messes because we look for somebody to blame. I was telling you yesterday, when something really bad happens and we're like, it's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. Immediately after, it's like we're trying to do this confirmation within that that's just not me. Because that's the only solace that might be left, is to think, I'm not yet a monster.
Well, right. And there's something dangerous about that because it's a blind spot, right?
It's absolutely a blind spot. Yes.
The capacity that is within the human being, and also our capacity to be guided away from the heart, right? To develop belief systems, to have the mind indoctrinated into a belief system that says, this is okay. This is okay to do bad to others. And consulting the heart would never agree with that. It just doesn't. But we are not raised to remain connected to heart knowing. And part of it is because of the pain, right?
Marianne, that's all I kept thinking while you were saying that. It gave me a little anxiety because even having tried so hard to do it, I got a little nervous while you're saying that, because I'm like, yeah, but it means to sit smoldering in on yourself.
Yes, it's very painful.
It's excruciating to do that, and it feels to be like an impossibility, but that is the only way we do not become something detached from the heart that can and it's in that space that we can do things that are just so, I guess what we like to say is inhumane, but the fact is that is humanity also, because there's always that choice. So what we fear going against our nature is what's so uncomfortable. It's a different kind of discomfort on top of the obvious pain, right?
Well, I think it's basically how we feed the monster, right? So I think the heart asks the question to the monster, what do you need? Like, what do you really need? What do you need?
Somebody said the same thing to me yesterday.
Right?
The exact words.
And it starts to connect you to what you really need to have, and that's usually connected to some form of recognition, validation, love. We all need love at the core, where I think the mind asks the monster, what can we do about this? How do we solve this? What would feel good? And that can sometimes lead to dangerous choices. Sometimes it could lead to very productive choices, right? But others, it can lead to very dangerous choices
Yes.
and actions.
My gosh, Marianne.
So how do we feed the monster? What do
Well,
we feed the monster?
my thinking is you're talking about the heart, and to me, this speaks of the human spirit, the true nature of the human spirit, and that's that we do everything within our absolute capabilities for our current situation. Today it's at a table, much easier, but tomorrow should I find it different, but in any type of circumstance, to still live in accordance with our values that we have we seek through inside, right? And it's this inner resolve, the spirit, the heart. These can't be taken from us. We can remove ourselves from them, but the key to vitality is to stay bound. Death, devastation, it does happen. I know, in the most horrible way, the pain of that. But freedom is a separate thing from pain. And I'm not sure that I even believe it all the time, but I know it to be true. Okay? And when we stay in touch with our hearts, we remain free. Circumstances arise. People do horrible things to one another, to the planet. But we can still flourish, and I do mean flourish, not just that minimal survival and kind of like a pile of ants got smashed and some will always make it out. Beyond that, it's still remaining through like all this atrocities and everything in humanity. And that's that ability to take the quest, no matter what, and to search for the meaning that makes us human, and to still remain somehow open to it, even when the search has taken us right past that rubble. Now, not to infuse meaning, okay, but it's letting it rise itself, okay, this meaning. It's not that we're going to apply meaning to everything and I'm going to theorize. I'm not talking about that, but the life itself as it reveals itself to us. And we remain doing what we're put here to do. For me, you're here to be a healer. No matter what happens, my prayer for you would be that you continue to be a healer. That does not change. Mm-hmm. And I feel more comforted in my own freedom if you would be, and I'm not speaking for you or how life changes, because it can, but from my perspective, I feel safer as a human when I would see somebody still in line with who they've shown to be and how they've been meant to be until other indications arise. And it's to love, to continue loving, and to be brave. This is very hard to say and sometimes controversial, but I still believe it's to be brave even in suffering. And it does take a whole lot of bravery to not get swallowed by it and to not counter it with inflicting suffering. And so we continue trying to fulfill that task that you think you're here to do. And if it changes, you go to the next task. We realize that life is hard, but we're determined to stay connected to the heart. And today we had brought the names of the victims in. And when we speak about them and we look at the names, so many names, so much pain, and so much to just hold in our hearts.
Yes.
We have to remember that they passed 20 years ago, but they in some way get to continue giving to their task because we bring them with us. And it's not just like us being that vehicle for them, but it's like truly we keep them alive. Almost like, I don't want to make this more shallow, but there's a lot to be said about the Greek tragedy. And a lot of it is working out what part's God, what part's us, what part's messy, but what they didn't have was the information we do. So it was also this idea of keeping people alive by remembering. And that's sometimes what you hope to do. And sometimes I would go the next step and say, living just a little better for them.
Absolutely. And, in a sense, if in fact what was revealed to me, the falling of the towers and the loss of the people and the bravery of the people, all the people, revealed that human beings really need each other. It was this interdependence that we forget in a culture that is very individualistic and sends the message that we can forge out there on our own. And it's part of, I've been very, very devoted my whole life to the hero's journey and the search for meaning. But as I am getting older, I am not so interested in that anymore because it is a very individual quest. And I think that we're in a position now of we're just all in this together. And what it comes down to are these opportunities, these moments, like you said, Lori, to love and care for each other. That's the act of the heart. That's the act of living in the heart. And that is it. And the values are that, what you started this podcast with. This notion of we value community, those who are here in body, those who have been lost and are here in spirit, and those who are yet to come, those who are young, those who are old. We all need each other and need to really hold each other up like those men and women did in the final moments. That's what resonates to me. Are the I love yous, the willingness to go into a building that is collapsing to possibly save one person. Like, wow, that is the ultimate of what human beings are capable of.
We
So
are.
we saw the worst of what humans are capable of that day, and we saw the best of what the human heart is capable of. And so I'm glad we did this show today to continue to figure this out and to honor it and reflect and carry forward the legacy of interdependence and care and love and moving forward.
It is. So it's so important. I was one of the last things I pictured on my drive over here was trying to think for myself, and also for everybody, like, who around you makes you uncomfortable? Who do you think you dislike? Who do you go beyond that with? Could you imagine being with them on that top floor when the rest disappears?
Right.
Who would you be to each other in that moment? And when these things happen, and that's everything you said is what I would call the meaning. And I do think it is. I cannot say for anybody what their meaning is. And people do need the space to do that. But that is the meaning, that it's not just for the sake of tragedy that tragedy happens.
No.
It's that there is
A revelation. for
yes,
sure.
and what we can become because of it. But when everything else is taken away, things are just quickly removed, and all that remains are two humans completely made equal in the discomfort and the complete disintegration caused by the tragedy, they will reach out to each other.
Yes.
And sometimes
Yes.
that's the only tiny little answer we get, because in my mind, for myself, I say this: if that would be the only way I would ultimately get it, that would be a small price.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not speaking about them, but for me and my own pride and my own shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot
that.
say in that moment what it would mean. Everything we think we value, once it's removed, things become very clear very fast
Yes.
in tragedy.
Yes.
And thank you for being here with me. And I just really, really sit in reverence of the people that were lost that day and the families that remain living and who have had to find a way to continue with what's left. And some of them had to create something to continue with because they felt nothing was left. Some take them with them. And in our very small way, I hope we can make just the smallest adjustments at minimum to remember them and so many other people from so many other places whose suffering has been equal and tragic and shocking and just can have everything we felt that day. We're fortunate to be so shocked because the alternative would be that it's so normal, it's no longer shocking. And in this way, I hope every chance we get, we cling to it and let the light grow around those names, those 3,000 names. It's 20 years later. If it's somebody's first time hearing about it, then it begins with you today. If it's somebody's first time getting it, it starts today. You're never late to get into your heart. You're never late to begin loving. That's all I can think to say about
Amen.
it in the
Yes,
end.
because it is a prayer.
Yes.
It is.
So thank you for those who've joined us for this solemn talk, and necessary, absolutely necessary. I hope that we choose to look at things that are uncomfortable because of what it means to do so and what it implies that our tasks are. How can you help? How can you make this a little better? And then would you? You can like and share the podcast. You can like and share Strong Island Radio. Hi, Bobby. Here with Bobby. And until next time, please take care of each other, love each other, have a look, and then have a second look, and farewell.